Hi all.
Hello.
Hey guys,
Hey, Jason. I think we're up and running on the Facebook.
I see it. Yep. There's a lag, as I recall.
Yeah, it's about like 30 seconds or so.
Well, hey guys. So it's about 7 o'clock now. We're gonna give people a few minutes to get here. I can see the numbers going up, the viewership numbers going up, so that's great. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Very good. So I see we're getting up in viewers now. We're giving it just another minute or so for people to find the link. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. We've got a good lineup, some elected officials, some
So I see we're getting
newly
up in
elected
viewers
officials, and we'll have some important information about voting and about county committee and all kinds of fun stuff. So stay tuned. We'll be with you in just a second here.
And for those of you who are already tuned in, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and like our Facebook page if you haven't done so already. We'll be sharing more updates there as we get closer and closer to Election Day.
All right, we're about 5 or 6 minutes after 7, so I think we're good to go. We're joined by a number of interesting guests, and I think some more people will be coming, joining along as we go here tonight. So first, I want to say thank you to everybody who's watching. We really appreciate you finding us and joining us. in these crazy times. We're glad that we're able to find a way to be together, even in this small way. Even though we can't be together in person, we can still talk about what's going on. We can hear from our elected officials, hear some updates and some ways that we can all pitch in and work together this fall. This is such an important time, both for the country, for Brooklyn, for our communities, and for probably a big national race that we're all keeping an eye on. So wanted to start off tonight just with a quick memory of a friend of IND. We got some tragic news last week, at the end of the week. Buddy Scotto, who was a founder of the club, an initial member of the club, passed away. Buddy was really important to the club. He helped found it at the time, got things going. He's been a presence for many, many years. I put up an interesting announcement about him, I think, on the day after he died, and a bunch of people wrote in with comments and recollections of their own about Buddy. If you knew Buddy, if you want to take a minute to read through those, you can find them on our Facebook page. Some really interesting stories. But Buddy was great guy. He was one of a kind. He held elected officials' feet to the fire when they came through IND. He had lots of questions. He was a very welcoming member. He told a lot of stories and was just a wonderful person to be around for a long time. So our thoughts are with his family. We will miss Buddy greatly, but we were sure lucky to know him. So we'll keep him in our thoughts tonight. I also wanted to touch briefly on some things that the club has been doing and will be doing this fall, as we're all pitching in on campaigns, both locally and nationally. There are so many different places for people to pitch in right now, both on electoral politics, on the census, on organizing, all kinds of different ways. And we've tried to really be of aid for anybody who's looking for things to do. We have done some phone banking for Andrew Gennardis. We've done some phone banking for Max Rose. Those are some of the races that we have close to home here in Brooklyn that are going to be of interest to everybody and could be tight. We're also pitching in on the national races on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We've been making calls to Arizona. We're working on setting some things up in Maine and other places. We've been working with Sister District and with some of our other fellow clubs. So I'm going to throw it over to Alyssa Meyer to discuss some of the upcoming events that'll take us through mid-October or so.
Thanks, Jason, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We have a packed agenda for the upcoming weeks. I can't even say months anymore because it's so close. But the next 47 days, I believe, will be super exciting, though we won't be doing the normal things like door-to-door canvassing and green markets and subway stops. We will definitely be doing a lot more of this. So upcoming, we have on Tuesday, the 22nd, we have a phone bank for Max Rose, who we know he has a really tight race. And I must say he's doing great on the commercial fronts. If you guys saw that very short snippet of a commercial, I thought it was hilarious. Happy to drop the link in if you haven't seen it yet. We also have a Biden-Harris phone bank a week from tonight on Thursday, September 24th. Then again on October 3rd, we have a Max Rose phone bank. We're also supporting Matilda Fuentes on October the 10th, and then a phone bank for Andrew Gennardis on the 19th of October. And this is a lot of info coming at you, but you can always stay up to date on IND's calendar. You can click the link in our email or go to indbrooklyn.org, where our calendar remains up to date and the best source for all the information that you need. And follow us on Twitter and Facebook and all of the socials. We're there to let you know about upcoming events, virtual, of course, but in person, in spirit, of course. I'll pass it back to Jason. Oh, I also wanted to mention, as we go through this virtual meeting, feel free to drop any questions that you have in the Facebook chat. I'm monitoring as we go, so I can raise your question to the speakers that we have, or if you have just general questions or comments, happy to throw some in as well. You can also tweet us. We're at IND Brooklyn, and we're very responsive on the Twitter front. Great. Now I'll actually pass it back to Jason.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alyssa. The other thing I want to mention is we try to take attendance. Members who attend there's an attendance requirement and you pay your dues and you're allowed to vote in endorsement meetings. That's going to be really important next year. We're talking about 2020. Everybody's got their eye on the prize for November. But believe it or not, we're not that far out from what's going to be a pretty crazy year with several citywide offices are up, several council races. There's a lot of candidates. There's the borough president's race. There's a lot going on next year as well. So you want to make sure you're getting to meetings and paying your dues. So to that end, we're trying to do our best to take attendance here, even though we're virtual. So please go ahead and like the post. Comment in the Facebook thread with your name just to let us know you're here. Something to indicate that you were here. Ask a question, like Alyssa mentioned. That's a great way. We're going to be talking to a couple of our elected officials soon, and we'll have Martin Connor on, who's an expert in election law and a number of other things. And you may want to ask him about some of the topics he's discussing. So please go ahead and interact with the post so that we see you, so that we know you're there, and we'll keep track of you. And thanks Lynn Hill and Tyler Rocky for keeping an eye on that. They'll be trying to tally that in the chat. So with no further ado, we've got a couple of our elected officials here, and then we'll get to our programming about voting this November. I wanted to introduce someone who we haven't seen in a few months, a new, I would say, senator-elect. I guess he's got to go through the general election first. But we're very excited to have Jabari Brisport here to talk to us about what he's been up to, what he looks forward to in the fall, and maybe what he's looking forward to next year in the Senate. So thanks so much, Jabari, for being with us.
Thank you, Jason, and good evening, IND. I'm so happy to be back. Really excited to hear all the work you're doing for Max Rose. So fun fact that a lot of people don't know, Max Rose and I actually went to high school together. We were on the wrestling team, and he could probably still kick my butt. So he's a stand-up gentleman, and I'm happy that you're all doing your best, everything to make sure that he stays in office. I know it's a tough district. Again, my name is Jabari Brisport. I'm going to be the senator-elect in the 25th State Senate District, which contains the 52nd Assembly District. I'm taking over after Belknap Montgomery retires at the end of this year. I am a public school teacher. I'm actually teaching for the next few months until I take office in January. So if there are any teachers on the call or parents who are frustrated about the news of schools being pushed back, my email is wide open to hear your concerns and complaints. I'll put it into the chat after I finish speaking. But a little bit about me, aside being a public school teacher, an advocate for the working class. I'm a progressive Democratic Socialist candidate. And my platform, for those who don't know, was centered around universal demands, housing for all, fully funded education, healthcare for all, fighting back against a broken racist criminal legal system, fighting back against a broken racist policing system, and ensuring that immigrants are respected and that we uplift the most marginalized people in our society. Oh, and a lot of climate focus, especially as a teacher who spends time around young people every day. I really want to make sure that the city is not underwater when they're my age. So again, it's a pleasure to be here, and kudos to y'all for trying to take attendance. So it's a struggle digitally. I know, teacher knows. It's how much harder it is to take attendance when people are on a Zoom. But I don't have an office yet. We won't have one probably till the new year, and not a much campaign or office infrastructure set up yet. But I am going to put in my email address. One, if you want to just talk about schooling or that, or just any other concerns, I'll do my best to help you out or direct you towards someone who knows better than me. So I'll just put that in now, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Jabari. And if I could impose on you, we got news today, big news on shifting the school opening calendar again. I think
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of teachers were caught unexpected, parents were caught unexpected. How's that been for you? How's your experience been with that? I know a lot of people are frustrated.
Oh, well, it's very frustrating because in an ideal circumstance, they would have just made one decision and given us ample time to prepare. Like, if they want to say we're remote for the first few months or remote for the fall and given us time to prepare, that would be ideal. But we're seeing the same repeats of March, where March was the worst. Everyone got 12 hours notice, right? They told us like 5 p.m. on a Sunday that schools were closed the next day. And we're starting to see a repeat of that. And when teachers and administration don't have adequate time to plan, then it means the students suffer. And I'm sure the families are stressed out and suffer. It's a mess, and it could be going a lot better. But I am happy to open just hear whatever people's others concerns are, whether you're a teacher like myself or a parent, or if there are any students on the call too. I'm happy to hear that as well.
Fantastic. Well, our hearts go out to the parents who are trying to deal with this and manage a difficult home life, and also to our teachers. We have a lot of teachers and retired teachers who are members of the club and who are very active in the area. And so, you guys are doing heroes work, and good luck in very less than ideal circumstances. So we were just joined by our Assembly member, Joanne Simon, and I know she's got another commitment that she's going to try and get to. So thank you so much, Joanne, for joining us. We were just hearing from Jabari a little bit about his thoughts and priorities for the upcoming session, and curious if you want to talk a little bit about what you've been up to and what you're looking ahead to.
Well, thank you. And I think that legislatively, many of us are on the same page. We, of course, have not had session. Many of us were looking forward to having a session in September so that we could get to work at raising revenue for New York State. As you know, we have needed revenue for quite some time. And of course, COVID has just made it all the more necessary that we raise revenue. We have not yet been able to do that. So unfortunately, I'm still here in Brooklyn and not in Albany, or Zooming in Albany as we do now in session. So we are still hopeful that we will be called back into session to deal with the revenue that New York needs to raise. As many of you know, I've been involved in the Revenue Working Group, which is a group of legislators who have been looking at ways that we can raise revenue and pushing those ideas and principles forward to the leadership and the governor's office. And I'm happy to share that in greater detail with anybody who wants to know. So that means that other things that we were looking to pass when we would come back into session, we're not able to get to, right? So there are some bills related to hospital closures, to nursing homes, and other things that we're not going to be able to deal with yet. And I'm really looking forward to Zellner passing the dyslexia screening for people who are entering corrections facilities and hopefully get that to the governor's desk. So that is a couple things that are still on hold. Obviously, I've been doing a lot of work around schools reopening and about the census. We've been out with and encouraging people to sign up to the census. If anybody at this meeting has not done their census, do it before the meeting is over. Go to 2020census.gov. They say 10 minutes, 10 questions, 10 minutes. I can tell you it's not even. It's very easy, it's very quick, and we need everybody to be counted. And here's the thing, we have in the 52nd Assembly District a certain amount of census apathy. And that is that people are just going to get around to it eventually. Well, we have about 2 weeks. So now would be the time to do this. We are under the city average. We are under the Brooklyn average in Brooklyn Heights and Cobble Hill. Not very good. I tweeted and tagged them all, and they have apparently started reaching out to their neighbors. We really need for people to complete the census. I can't tell you how important it is to everything. It is not just about how many seats we have in Congress, which is phenomenally important, but like people don't realize that if you need to have X number of psychiatric beds in hospitals, if you need X number of ICU units, if you want to know where you can get a bus route, all of these things rely on the census tract. They use that to determine roads, et cetera, et cetera. So the census information is critical to everything we do in our lives. And so you can tell I'm stressing that. And then I just want to say that, also remember Buddy, who was somebody I have worked with on community issues throughout Western Brooklyn for, 25 years or more. And he's really quite a unique character and always, always, always a gentleman to everybody. And we will miss him very much. And I also just want to put in a pitch, for all of the phone banking everybody is doing. It's easy. There's text banking you can do as well. We'll be doing more with the Biden-Harris campaign and other local races. And I also want to encourage you, in the words of Abigail Adams, and that is, remember the women. And so let's remember to support women candidates, particularly those women who are looking to flip red seats in the US Congress. Jackie Gordon in New York 2, Nancy Goroff in New York 1, Dana Balter is upstate, she's in New York 24, Tedra Cobb is 22, Tracy Matrano is 23. We can actually get some really kick-ass women in Congress to join the congressional delegation that we have in the House that will actually be solid Democrats. So I'm looking forward to supporting those candidates as well as all of the other candidates that IND is supporting this year. So thanks very much.
Excellent.
And look, I
Yeah.
got new bookshelves, but they're not all full yet. But see,
I will say somebody in the comments has already pointed out they spotted the power broker behind you, Joanne. So mark that card on your bingo card.
you want to know what year I bought that? I was working on the Gowanus Expressway tunnel issue for, a long time ago. And that's when I bought the power broker. It's a great one.
Oh, good. And that issue's solved, right?
Yeah, right. Actually, it will be. It will be. I'm still working on it. We'll do it.
Very good. And we did make some calls for Tedra Cobb a couple of weeks ago, and I think we'll do that again. So that's another thing I wanted to point out. We've got these phone banks that we've been organizing that we referenced. Alyssa talked about them, but we've also got here on this page that you're probably watching this streaming or on our discussion page, our Facebook group, Independent Neighborhood Democrats. A lot of people, there's a lot of good conversation. So if you have a phone bank you're interested in, something another organization is working on, or just you're bored on a Wednesday night and you're doing a phone bank for Biden Harris, feel free to post about that stuff and encourage other people to join in. So we're going to try and organize them ourselves and run them for ourselves. But lots of people are doing great phone banks and great volunteer opportunities, and we want to try and promote all of those. Alyssa, have there been any questions or any comments from the Facebook comments for our two speakers so far?
We got a thank you for Jabari, so thank you. We also got an amen from Lincoln Ressler to Joanne about supporting those kick-ass women in Congress. His words, not mine, though I concur. A lot of talk about the power broker, and just want to point out I have mine also above my shoulder, bought more recently than yours, but that's it. But keep the questions and comments rolling in. I don't see much action on the Twitter, but always happy to answer those questions and voice them for you all.
Okay, fantastic. For anybody who joined, please make sure you make a comment or like the post or some way to indicate that you're here. We're trying to take attendance as best we can. So, and we'll take an amen from Lincoln Ressler. That's always a prized thing to have. So thanks, Lincoln. We've also got our incoming district leader, our female district leader, Jessie Pierce. This is Jessie's a candidate that a lot of us worked really hard on that campaign. It was kind of a hard-fought June campaign, and Jessie has been doing some great work. I've seen personally her signing people up to be poll workers online. I've watched that play out right in front of me. So Jessie, why don't you tell us about what you've been working on, maybe anything, issues for the election that we should be aware of, and what you're planning ahead.
Hello, IND. Thank you so much, Jason. So great to be here with you all again. And congrats to Jabari and hello to Joanne. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, District Leader-elect, very much partly due to the strength efforts of IND. So good to be here with you all. Yeah, so I've been trying to stretch my district leader-elect wings and kind of get my feet under me. And just speaking about recruiting poll workers, in no surprise to anyone here, but Joan Millman has been a great guide and excellent teacher for me, kind of showing me the ways and took me to the Board of Elections and introduced me around, of course, while we all wore masks. So I met a lot of new friends at the Board of Elections and just trying to do the work of recruiting more people to be poll workers. So most of that recruitment has been via Facebook, so trying to get new people to sign up and posting in some of the neighborhood groups. And I think that also really open to wanting to get out in the neighborhood and just touch base with people to see if they would be open to being poll workers. I think what we saw in in June of, I don't think it's a secret for anyone who's been part of IND for a long time. I know a lot of people here also have signed up to be poll workers in the past and are no stranger to the work. That the age group of poll workers tends to be older, which makes it a riskier group with COVID-19. So I think the more that we can get new people signed up, new people who are in a lower risk group, the better off that we'll be. And there are trainings happening now. I'm actually going to go to the basic class tomorrow. So happy to talk about that with anyone who will go with it, who's been to it and is planning on attending. And there's some exciting stuff happening. Like I know that the Barclays Center being a center was in the news. And so I did get some information that at least one election district will be rerouted to Barclays. So we'll definitely be sharing that information far and wide. And I've also been part of the Gender Task Force. So Chair Rodney Spichot invited me to be a member of the Gender Task Force, which is evaluating the gender requirements at the county committee level. We've had 3 meetings so far, so it's been some interesting conversation. I think that, my personal belief is that we should have a full repeal of the gender designation, but I think that there will be some additional comment places for people to participate in the conversation, a to be scheduled public forum. And I'm happy to keep everyone here up to date and abreast of what's going on there. And I think that's it. Plus one, all the phone banking and the census work. If anything, I know that this group does a mean phone bank, so happy to participate. And I would say too, if you can carve out 30 minutes, I think at a minimum that, everybody needs all the help that they can get. And so plus one to all that.
Thanks, Jesse. We got a couple questions for you. Well, first, Vicky and Jan both said that they finished their poll worker training recently, so that's great. And then Hal wants to know if you know when absentee ballots will be handed out. And I'm going to throw another question on you. Jan wants to know if there's an actual poll worker shortage. She's a big proponent of poll working, but just is curious.
Yeah, so I would say that when it came to June, and Joanne can speak to this a little bit too, but I think what we saw is, so the 52nd has a lot of poll sites just in general, and so we want a lot of people to be able to work, and then I think also people indicated that they wouldn't be able to work due to conditions or just feeling unsafe when it came to COVID-19, but I believe the Board of Elections staffed them anyway, and so then there were a lot of no-shows at the election site, and I think just in general no-shows of people who are afraid to work. So I do think that when it comes to actual staffing at the Board of Elections, that there's definitely room to grow and get more people involved. But I do believe there was a big influx of people signing up. I think the largest sign up, and I think Joanne has more of those specifics, but I don't know numbers in terms of where people are going to be staffed right now in the 52nd, because the way that I understand it works is once people have gone through basic training, which is through October 9th, so there's still time to sign up if people haven't signed up yet. The trainings will be going on through the end of September, and October 9th is, I believe, the last day, and then early voting starts October 24th. So there's still time. And then once the basic trainings are done, there'll be people to then slot into different positions. But when I reviewed the list of positions and poll sites, there definitely look like we could use a little help in the 52nd.
Great. Jesse, can I ask you about early voting? I know we're not quite there yet, but do we know yet where the early voting sites in the 52nd would be, if hopefully there are some?
Yes. Yeah, I think I need to follow up on this, but I believe the early voting sites are already posted. So if you check in on your poll site locator, you can see what your early voting site is. And I think it's going to be the same as what it was in the June election. So the College of Technology, I think on J Street, is a big one for the 52nd, and Barclays will also be an early voting site, and also an election day site, is my understanding. And then there's probably others that I'm missing. But basically what you saw in June, you will see early voting, and definitely just want to emphasize that I think if you feel comfortable and safe, early voting is absolutely the voting plan for this election. That's what I personally will be doing.
Oh, I see the county.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I think,
Thanks.
and I personally agree with that. And I actually think this is an important issue. You know, it's great that we have mail voting and vote by mail. And for folks who don't want to go out, I think that's a great choice. I've personally been concerned. I don't know how other people feel. I've personally been concerned about potential shenanigans on election or after the election night. So I'm going to make a point of voting early. I want to make sure that my vote is counted and reported right away. I hope a lot of other people who are able to do that and feel comfortable doing that can do so. I also had a really good experience in June with the early vote site. I thought they did a great job. There were ample masks and lots of people to help. I thought it was a very safe setup, and most importantly, it was quick. It was in and out. We know there's going to be huge turnout this year. There's going to be lots and lots of folks who want to vote on election day. There's going to be a lot of folks who vote by mail. But I think if you pick an early vote day and just make a point of doing it, getting it out of the way, not only will you not have to wait as long, but then you're freed up on election day and on election weekend to help get out the vote for others. So I think that's a really good plan. So thanks so much for that information, Jesse. Speaking of voting, Martin Connor, who's a former senator, represented our area here, reached out to me about some of the complexities about vote by mail and other forms of voting. This is a little bit new this year, a little bit different than other years for a variety of reasons, including some obvious ones. But Marty wanted to talk a little bit about some of the differences, some of the challenges, some of the specifics of it. We want to make sure everybody's got the right information so they can make up their own mind and most importantly, make sure their vote counts. So Senator, what do you have for us? And you're muted, right? Just a reminder.
I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted now, I guess. Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I just wanted to go, you know, there's in my experience, so many misimpressions out there about how absentee voting works and so on. I guess the biggest myth that I've heard repeatedly, I first heard it when I was about 9 years old, and I asked my father, absentee votes, and he said, oh, they only count them when it's close. Well, I've heard that 2 weeks ago from some people, and I've heard it from people in the club and other people. They only count the absentee ballots when it's close. No, they always count all of the valid absentee ballots. The difference is when an election's close, everybody pays attention to the counting of the absentee ballots. Otherwise, Board of Elections employees just sit there and count them with no watchers or any, you know, they're bipartisan teams. So, you know, if you ever hear anybody say that, well, they only count it if it's close, that's just wrong. Totally wrong. The fact is, New York is not a vote by mail state. New York is an absentee ballot state. And the preference in New York is voting in person. What that means is, for example, you have to have a reason and apply for the absentee ballot. The statutory reasons are you're going to be out of the city of New York or out of the county if you're upstate on election day, or you're ill. There are also permanent absentees. A lot of elderly people just sign up and say, I can never get to the polls, I have disabilities or whatever. And they automatically have every election an absentee ballot sent to them. This year, the difference, of course, is that initially for the primary by the governor's executive order, and I think now the legislature's adopted it, the fear of COVID or risk of exposure to COVID is a reason for absentee ballots. What we saw in the primary was throughout the state, there were 1.1 million absentee ballots applied for 4 years ago, with a very, very hot primary between Bernie and Hillary Clinton. Statewide, there were only a total of 114,000 absentee ballots applied for. So in New York City and in a lot of districts, we experienced 10 to 15 to 20 times the number of absentee ballots cast as one would expect. the whole infrastructure of the boards of elections was set up to deal with somewhere between 2 and 3% of the votes coming in on absentees. In Brooklyn, the whole absentee operation used to be 2 employees, in a little cubicle at the Board of Elections, and they processed all the applications and mailed out all the absentee ballots. If they got a little busy, they could call in and 2 more people. Why I say that is half were Republicans and half Democrats, as required by law and the Constitution. And they handled all the absentee ballots. This year, the board, anticipating what happened, contracted out to outside vendors who have done this for other states. And so when they got an application, the board still had to validate it in the sense of looking up, make sure the person's registered in the case of a primary registered Democrat, and then electronically transmit that information to the vendor. One of the vendors was in Rochester, and they would print the ballot, prepare all the envelopes and everything, and send them out to the voter. There were breakdowns. The post office received on the Monday morning before the primary 32,000 absentee ballots to be mailed. And interestingly enough, the man in charge of the plant in Manhattan, all mail that's collected in New York City goes to a plant in Manhattan. You put something in your mailbox. If you're there before the pickup time, you put it in. That gets picked up, and that will get that day's postmark. That postmark is applied in a big facility in Manhattan, running everything through these high-speed sorters. He took it upon himself with those 32,000. He described how they have red mail sacks where they put the express mail, guaranteed next day delivery. He took it upon himself to treat all those ballots as next day delivery mail. So they were delivered to people, at least who were in Manhattan and New York City that Tuesday morning. But the odds of somebody getting that and getting it postmarked that day, of course, were very slim. You heard a lot about no postmarks. That was a Brooklyn problem. I have a theory that partly explains it, I think. But in the whole borough of Queens, there were only 8 ballots that didn't have a postmark. In Manhattan, there were a total of 70. In Brooklyn, there were a few thousand. I think a lot of it has to do with probably what was well-intentioned at the Cadman Plaza post office, i.e., they get these ballots collected from our whole end of Brooklyn, and they're all addressed to the Board of Elections at 11201, and Cadman Plaza is 11201. And every day they testified, carts full of trays, 50, 60 trays, 200 ballots a tray, across the street to Adams Street to the Board of Elections. And I think somebody there saw trays of ballots addressed to 11201 and thought, why should we send them to Manhattan, where they put postmarks on, and get them back tomorrow? We can just take them over there today. It shouldn't have happened that way, but it happened. But it wasn't as widespread a citywide problem. The big problem, unsigned security envelopes. I call it that because that's what it technically is. And I'm very upset now about the press saying, you got to sign your ballot, be sure and sign your ballot, because a large number of ballots were thrown out for the missing signature. But you don't sign the ballot. If you sign the actual ballot, it's invalid. You sign the security envelope, you put the ballot in. And I anticipate a number of ballots this time are going to be lost because the people have to sign the actual ballot rather than the envelope. The board is redesigning the envelope to make it a little more prominent that you have to sign it. One of the problems the city board has is those envelopes have to be in 4 or 5 languages, so it gets pretty crowded and you can miss the signature line. The next thing you hear people say is, well, let me tell you about some of the mail problems. And this has been publicized, but even before what I believe is a calculated disruption and slowdown in the postal service for, generated out of Washington. The deadline in New York for mailing an application is 7 days before the election. Think about it. That means somebody could mail something in a post office that's open till 8 o'clock, like Cabin Plaza. It's 7 o'clock. The Tuesday night, a week before the election. The postal witnesses in that federal court case said, well, our delivery up until recently, whatever's going on now, their delivery for New York City was 2 days, and they met it 98% of the time. 2 days from mailing to delivery. Okay, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That meant the borough offices were receiving applications the Thursday before the election. They're valid, they had a postmark. Then they had to process them, send the information to Rochester, and the odds are they're not getting a ballot in the mail until that next Monday. The Board of Elections proposed to the legislature changing that deadline to 15 days before, or 14 days before, which was what the post office recommends. And the leadership in the legislature refused to do it because Susan Lerner from Common Cause and some of the other good government groups, oh no, that's regressive. We're taking away rights from voters, which to me was absurd because you're not helping the voter by telling them, do this and you'll be fine, when in fact it's a physical impossibility for them to get a ballot in time if they mail it 7 days before the election. So the one thing I think people need to be doing, and it's happening, and I see it online, and it's on the Board of Elections website in big letters. Do not rely on this deadline. We have to tell people, if you're going to do an absentee ballot, mail it 2 weeks before the election. Otherwise, you're not going to get a ballot back. The other thing I think that happened in the primary is I looked on the Board of Elections website, City Board of Elections website, and it said, postmark your ballot by election day, or you can bring it to the borough office of the Board of Elections by election day. Well, the borough office is convenient for a lot of us in downtown Brooklyn, but for most of Brooklyn, it's a trip. What they never mentioned there was, now they do, or you can hand it in or have somebody hand it in at any polling place, any early voting polling place or any election day polling place. And it doesn't have to be the voter that hands it in. You can give it to a neighbor, a friend, a relative. Hey, you're going to go vote, take my ballot in. A lot easier than getting to the borough office. And of course, the press before the primary picked up from the Board of Elections website, and they never mentioned that you could hand it in a polling place. The other thing I think we ought to, people who are thinking about getting votes out, unlike North Carolina, where we had that case about harvesting ballots, it is not against the law in New York for somebody to go around and collect absentee ballots from people and take it in to a polling place or the Board of Elections. That is legal. But if you're going to do that, you want to make sure the voters filled it out and sealed the envelope before you have it. You don't want anybody accusing the person who's collecting it of voter fraud. I filled it out, they signed a blank envelope. You can't do that. But you can. Anybody can take a ballot in for somebody. And I suggest maybe there are some places and buildings with a lot of seniors or whatever, where, a little notice or whatever, somebody set up, hey, we'll be happy to take your ballot in. Then it got in. You put it in the mail, even if it's early enough, who knows whether they'll get it in time.
Thank you very much, Senator. I think that's a good, if you can vote early, fantastic. If you're going to vote in person, but that's really good advice about if you're asking for an absentee ballot, don't rely on the mail. Don't necessarily send it off and not be sure what's happening. You can drop it off, or you can have somebody else drop it off for you at a polling site or at the central site. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do we? Well, I'll
Now,
give you
just
one
a little
more-
bit of the mechanics, if I can, because what you hear a lot, why did it take so long to count the ballots? And that of course is an issue. Well, the fact is, as I pointed out, the preference in New York law is voting in person. In fact, if you applied for an absentee ballot because you were going to be out of town at a meeting, and you send it in, oh, your meeting's canceled, and you're in town on election day, you're supposed to go vote in person. And what the board has to do under New York system is, before they can begin to open absentee ballots, they enter them all obviously now on a computer system, but they have to compare the absentee ballot to the early voting and election day voting poll book to make sure the person didn't vote in person. Because if the person voted in person, didn't do anything wrong, but the absentee ballot then is invalidated because they voted in person. And that, when you have hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots, takes the Board of Elections a lot of time.
Hey, Marty,
And-
sorry,
yeah.
just chiming in with a question, which I think what you were just talking about covers it, but Jonathan wants to know, when do absentee or mail-in ballots get counted, and why wait till after the polls close?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, any absentee ballot received up till a week after the election is valid if it has a postmark of election day. So some of what they tend to do, well, let's wait till all the ballots are in. One reason they do that was always to preserve secrecy, because of typically on the 7th day after the election, they'll receive 5 ballots. And if they've already opened all those EDs and now they have 5 ballots from 5 different EDs, when they open them, the secrecy's gone. You know, they're not mixing them up in a stack. That said, what I proposed, and the second floor didn't take up on it, and we don't have time now, but what you need to do is reverse the process so that anybody who requests an absentee ballot, when the absentee ballot is sent out to them, their name is taken out of the poll book, the actual polling place book, right? So then you can start counting the absentees as they come in. And we can't do that now. And that's what other states do. Somebody said to me, yeah, but what if the person, they sent out an absentee ballot, but they never got it? I said, fine, they can go to the polling place and do an affidavit ballot, right? And then afterwards, the board will compare, oh, they did an affidavit ballot, they're a registered voter, we took them out of the poll book because they got an absentee, and then they check, oh, we never got their absentee ballot, so we'll count their affidavit ballot. I mean, there's a way to do it, but we have to change New York law. And obviously, administratively, for the boards to adjust to that, there's no time now for our general election. So, yeah, we're going to have, in some districts in the primary, 60% of the votes cast were cast in absentee ballots, as opposed to the usual 3 or 4% of the votes. Answer is, you don't know who won election night. You're not going to know in a lot of races. Now, in New York City, most races are not seriously contested in the general election. Obviously, the congressional seat, Staten Island and Brooklyn, is different, but there are very few races, local races in New York City that you'll know the result. We know the result now. Let's put it that way. People just have to vote first.
I think you're right on the process too, and as you point out, that's something that works in a lot of other states, and it's a shame we don't have time to fix it this time for ourselves, but hopefully looking forward, that may be something we can do. And actually on that point, I wanted to mention that Zellner Myrie, who is actually chair of the election committee in the Senate, was supposed to join us tonight. Unfortunately, I think as some people know, Zellner's been sick for a little while. He called me not long before the meeting. I could barely hear him. He's been without a voice for, I think, a little while now. So he sends his regrets and asks to be invited back later this fall when he's better. And of course, he will receive that invitation. We're always really happy to hear from Zellner. That's another race that was a real triumph for us 2 years ago. And I think he's doing great work. We'll stay in the Senate now. and speak to another senator who has joined us this evening. I know he's here by audio. I can't see him on video. Senator Brian Kavanagh, are you with us, Senator?
Yes, I am, and my video is a little spotty, so I'm just gonna. I think I'm gonna stay in audio because I think you'll be able to. Folks will be able to hear me better if I do that. If that's
Got
okay.
it. Sound good.
Okay, great. I'm just going to give a few updates on various issues. First of all, in the many areas of that we're trying to work on helping people recover from the COVID-19 public health crisis and the subsequent economic crisis, we have a bill that we've been working on. We're calling the COVID-19 Recovery Lease Program. The idea is basically to authorize the city of New York through state legislation to link reductions in property taxes to reductions in commercial leases, long-term affordability for commercial leases, recognizing that many businesses cannot pay their rents anyway at the moment and are building up arrears. And at the same time, if the businesses can't pay the rents, the property owners are going to have trouble paying the property taxes. So this is something we'd actually been working on a variant of this with Brad Lander before COVID-19, but we've restructured the bill so that it is specific to this, to this crisis. And we've gotten a lot of support for it from small businesses and hospitality industry and lots of our colleagues. So we're hoping to pass this bill. It would create 10 years, a minimum of 10 years affordability. It would require that the lease resolve any outstanding issues, that it restructure any debt or arrears, and it would give landlords up to 10 years of property tax breaks. The idea is we authorize it, and then in a bill in the city council, that council member Brad Lander and Keith Powers, who's done a lot of work on small businesses, would do. They would put some of the details into the bill, and it would be a voluntary program, but we're hoping that it can be a big tool for addressing this, addressing the great difficulty that our small businesses are having. A few updates on transportation. I don't know if I see Joanne Simons here. I assume she's spoken already. I don't know if she covered the work we're doing on the BQE. I don't want to repeat.
No, you can go right ahead.
Okay, good. So
yeah, I didn't. I was doing a pep talk. So yes,
that's good. Well, Joanne is always more peppy than I am, so it's good. I'm glad we allocated that task to her. But we know that the BQE, the city had that kind of disastrous rollout of two options for fixing the roadway that were very problematic in various ways. There was a commission. They stepped back from that, recognizing that if they do short-term repairs, we'll get a number of good years out of the roadway, that mile and a half section that was proposed, and then we can rethink the entire length of the BQE in Brooklyn, which includes all kinds of issues that Joanne knows 20 times more than I do about, some of which are south of my district. But in the meantime, we are looking at some point trying to create some authority, some new entity that might address the enormous challenge of those projects. But shorter term, we are trying to address a basic issue that causes a lot of deterioration in the roadway, and that is overweight trucks. So we worked with DOT. Joanne is the sponsor of this in the Assembly, trying to get a bill passed that will allow the city to use modern enforcement mechanisms to basically effectively enforce overweight truck restrictions. It would weigh the trucks as they pass over sensors in the road. It would issue fines to the many trucking companies that are kind of fly by night and overload their trucks. And apparently overweight trucks are a significant portion of the damage to that roadway. So we're hoping that will, in addition to enforcing those rules, extend the useful life of the existing roadway and give us more flexibility as we move forward. We've had a couple of MTA projects, the Rutgers Tube, which is the subway that goes, the tunnel that brings the F train under the East River, needs to be repaired. This is the last of the major Sandy storm damage repairs that need to be done in tunnels. We are benefiting from the fact that the MTA figured out with some personal intervention from the governor how to do the L train more efficiently. So they don't need to fully close down the tube all the time, but there will be closures on nights and weekends. We had a forum on the implications of this that the MTA graciously participated in. And I can go into some of the details of the plan of how that'll work, but people will have to take alternate routes. but the F train will continue to run from Brooklyn into Manhattan and back. It'll just run through a different tube and have some diversions to different stations. And there are shuttle buses and the stations, a fairly robust way of allowing people to continue to get around during those closures. And it'll take about 8 months. The York Street station and the East Broadway station on the Manhattan side will be closed during those periods. And the people have asked, we've had a longstanding effort to try to get improved access to the York Street station. We had pushed for a second entrance, which the MTA had done a study of and determined would be extraordinarily expensive because it's, because of various structural issues. But we're still pushing them to provide some additional egress to that very tight station, which has become a lot more popular than it may have been in prior, at prior times. So we're still hoping that we'll get some progress on that in the course of this project. I go nowhere now without saying census, September 30th. It's 13 days from now. Please do it. Tell your friends to do it. Ask them why on earth they haven't done it, given all the exhortations, hundreds of millions of dollars, congressional representation. We did a rally in Foley Square on the Manhattan side of my district the other day with lots of folks, and we've done parades on the Lower East Side. But really, we really have to continue to get the word out. New York is behind the national average in a way that will really be problematic. Similarly, I know you had extensive conversation about voting. We did it's still a challenge, as my great predecessor, Marty Connor, noted, but people should get in, participate early, and we should all try to get the word out on that as well. Speaking of civic engagement, we're doing a town hall on young people's civic engagement in my Senate office. It's next Wednesday, the 23rd, from 7 to 8 p.m. We have a great panel of young people. It's aimed at high school and college age, maybe early 20s. Really, really looking forward to that. And again, with lots of young people doing most of the talking and hopefully some interactive features. So information about that is on, our Senate website. We did distribute it through various channels. So if you haven't seen it, maybe we can get it out to you, and you can circulate it among members as well. Just briefly on housing, I mentioned the small business ends of the COVID recovery thing. Before I get to COVID housing issues, we did have this hearing today. It was our second hearing on housing discrimination. The Newsday done some terrific reporting last fall on very extraordinary instances of and systemic housing discrimination in the Long Island home sale market. We'd done a hearing in December. We'd scheduled another one for early April. We had taken the unusual step of subpoenaing all of the brokers who were named in the article and declined to come in December. We had to postpone that hearing because of COVID. It was an in-person hearing in the second week of April, but we scheduled it for this morning. We had about 6 or 7 hours of hearing today. It's not just about Long Island. Obviously, there's a problem all over. We've had a lot of focus recently on systemic racial injustice. The core of that and the basis for that, much of that in the United States really is residential segregation, which was, of course, official policy of federal, state, and local government, and official policy of the real estate industry for a very long time. At minimum, we ought to be able to get these overt acts of discrimination out of the system, both in the rental and the sales market. So we have this terrific legislative package, and we're very serious. We took the step while we were doing the hearing. We went to state Supreme Court in Albany to compel the testimony of brokers who had declined to show up for a second time. And we're scheduling a follow-up next Thursday. And we've gotten in a negotiation with a judge and some attorneys for the brokers. They are coming next Friday to explain themselves. And again, we've also had lots of expert testimony. We have a great package of legislation on that as well that we're hoping to pass when the legislature reconvenes, which hopefully will be soon. Just on COVID and that terrible situation, the eviction moratorium in New York State is still in place. That's the good news. The bad news is it currently expires September 30th. We began pushing from the beginning in the very early days of COVID for the notion that you can't have evictions going on during a public health crisis. I don't think that we are, obviously things are getting better. We're not out of the woods yet. and we should not be permitting evictions. The federal CDC announced their version of an eviction moratorium, which goes till December 31st. It will be helpful in the event New York State allows our moratorium to elapse, but it's not nearly as comprehensive as or as protective. So there would be evictions occurring if that were the only protection. So the courts have done most of the work on this. We did a good 90-day eviction moratorium through executive order. The most recent step was taken by the courts and not by either the legislature or the governor. I have been pushing for the legislature and the governor to take responsibility for this. I have a bill that would extend it to extend the moratorium as a statutory matter until January 20th. Zeldin Myrie, who I actually had not heard is ill, but I hope he's feeling better soon. He has a bill that would extend it either further. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. He's a co-sponsor of my bill. We're trying to get a real legislative approach to this done. And again, this is urgent. The moratorium currently expires on September 30th, and potentially tens of thousands of people would be subject to very prompt evictions if we were allowed to expire. In the meantime, we've been working on paying the rent of people who haven't been able to pay because of the financial crisis. We passed our Emergency Rent Relief Act. The application period has closed. 90,000 applicants submitted requests for funding for that. HCR, the state agency, is working their way through eligibility determinations. That is only for people who are low income both before the crisis and have lost income, so they're even more severely burdened now. But the broader effort is to get a comprehensive voucher program. We call it the COVID Emergency Rental Assistance Program, CRAP. And the goal there is to get it federally funded. I think I've talked about this at IND before, but basically, we have a national coalition of people looking for $100 billion in rent relief nationally. To put that in perspective, that'd be about $10 billion from New York. It's 100 times the $100 million we've already allocated. And that is the scale of this problem. It's an enormous problem. If we can't pay the rent, it's obviously going to be a hardship for tenants. And it's also, many landlords, smaller landlords, aren't going to be able to pay their bills or their property taxes, and which the local government depends on to provide all the critical services we need. So it really continues to be an important priority. I have talked with our federal officials, and they are optimistic that if they manage to get a bill, that it would include rent relief. But obviously, those negotiations have been challenging in Washington.
Thank you, Senator. That's critical work. Really critical work. I think Alyssa's got a couple of questions for you from the chat. But before we do that, I'll just mention, I've seen the viewership numbers fluctuate up a little bit here. For anybody who's just joined us, please remind yourself to like the post or make a comment in the post or do something to show us that you're here, indicate you're paying attention, and we will be sure to count that for your attendance purposes. It's a little bit of a tough slog, but we're doing our best to count attendance here for voting purposes and that. So again, thank you very much, Senator. And I think Alyssa has a couple of questions for you from the comments.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Senator. A very thorough update. First, we got a few thank yous from Dara and Bridget and others, and Elizabeth. Toba wants to know if there's any update on the Clark Street Station elevator project. So I guess that's for you, and also Joanne, if you want to chime in on anything there.
Yeah, we're trying to figure. I'm not sure. My staff, we've been talking to MTA on an ongoing basis. So I'm not sure I have the absolute latest about what they're saying, but we are trying to figure out whether they can, expedite the project. There had been that question whether it was going to be a partial shutdown or full shutdown. They have decided to do a full shutdown for a shorter period rather than a partial shutdown for about 2 years. I don't think we have a clear answer yet on what the timing of that project is going to be. Joanne, if you know better,
Yeah, they are delaying that a bit because they can't do it with the other things that they're doing at Borough Hall and also with the partial shutdown of the F train because of the repairs to the Rutgers tube. So as much as they would have liked to have moved forward on that, they weren't able to. So they've told us they are not able to accelerate that.
Fantastic. Alyssa, other questions?
No other questions, but another reminder, feel free to drop questions in and we'll raise them in real time on our brief 30-second delay here. So thanks for all the questions and comments so far.
Okay, great. And maybe we'll give people a second to type that in. Joanne, you hosted a meeting this week with Senator Schumer that I was lucky enough to attend, a few other people. Anything you want to pass along from that meeting?
Well, it was a sort of a community roundtable, and he had wanted to talk to people who, about issues in the 52nd. As you know, he's a constituent, and to hear what was on people's minds. And so we pulled together people from various neighborhoods, various who represented concerns about various issues. So, for example, we had people who we had. Michelle Delauze from the Fifth Avenue Committee, who's really working with so many people who are really facing eviction, who have no rent. They are helping with rental assistance and food assistance. For example, people who were involved with the Gowanus Canal Superfund site and the rezoning, people from both community boards 2 and 6, people who were concerned about housing, people from different neighborhood organizations. And it was about 20 people, maybe 22. And it was a good group. The only person who had trouble getting in was the priest whose churchyard we used. Because he came up on his bicycle, I guess, looked a little scruffy, and they gave him a hard time letting him in the door. It was sort of funny, but it was a good group. He spent about an hour, a little more than an hour with everybody, answered questions, and explained to us what's going on in Washington and what the Democrats are doing. He talked about, how we would go forward with a Biden win, and how important it was to support not only the Biden-Harris team, but also this taking back the Senate. He was really familiar with a lot of the issues in the area, and I think found it very helpful to be talking to people who were very close on the ground to the issues as they're being experienced right now, particularly the COVID issues in the 52nd.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. People were asking him about where to spend their money and their resources right now to help, and he bypassed some of the sort of first line ones that we're thinking about, like Colorado and Maine, and some of the ones that we think of as easier pickups. And he said right now he's directing resources to Iowa and to Montana, right, because those are the ones that are sort of on the tipping edge. So I thought that was interesting. I've shared that with other folks as well. So Alyssa, any other questions for any of our elected officials come in during that time, or?
Nope, we can move in.
Fantastic. So then we'll end tonight. I want to thank Mariana Alexander for being very patient and waiting through. And she's got some information for county committee folks. And I know we've got a number of folks who are on county committee. Some people who've just joined for the first time. We had a very successful county committee drive, partnering with folks like Rep Your Block and NKD and CBID and IND. And so there's a lot going on. I know there's it's kind of a crazy manic political world right now in terms of our elected officials and our legislatures, but it's good to know that there's also people keeping a close eye on county committee and what's happening with that. And so there's some potential rule changes, some proposed rule changes that Mariana and others have been working very hard on. I know I had a chance to give some feedback. And so it's an exciting time for the King County Democratic Committee. Mariana, do you just want to, in brief, maybe go over some of these changes, talk to us about what it's about, and when, if we know, when we might get a chance to vote on them?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me and making the time. I know it's a busy time and I really appreciate it. So to give a little bit of context, also first, so my name is Mariana. I'm sure I know plenty of you on the call, but I am the president of the New Kings Democrats. The party organization has its organizational meeting, right? The meeting where it forms in September or the first week in October. And that is when the new county committee members kind of take their seats. And we're hearing that'll happen in the first week in October, but we haven't heard anything specific as to how the meeting is going to occur. It'll be in person or somehow over the internet. That is all to be fleshed out as far as we know. However, New Kings has been working on for a long time several rules changes, proposals that we would like to make and see voted upon. And before I get into them, and I will have to go over them at a very high level, just given time, I just want to talk about our process. So we have a policy committee that developed these proposals. We had 7 initially. We've talked to every district leader that is willing and able to talk to us, and other electeds as well. We've talked, for example, to Assemblymember Simon, and outreach to all the clubs that we had contact info as well, and really taken that feedback and made substantive changes to the proposals that we have. So hopefully they are representative of some form of consensus across the groups and folks that we've talked to, and really appreciate the feedback we got just on Monday from IND's leadership as well. So I will, with that, go into the proposals. The first, and I apologize, all of these are inherently very in the weeds in terms of the party's rules, but very happy to discuss them more with anyone who has any concerns or thoughts or questions. So the first is to codify the use of Robert's Rules of Order in county committee meetings. My understanding is that is the norm. They use that typically in those large county committee meetings. So this is just to codify that in the rules itself. The second proposal is a bit more substantive, and it pertains to proxies. So the current system, right, anyone can hold unlimited proxies. Typically the party chair, previously Frank Sedio, now Rodney Spachat, holds hundreds of proxies. So we're proposing that you actually limit that to 20 proxies per person, so that the voting power be distributed amongst the members to some extent. We're also have a proposal about having to get in the proxy earlier prior to a meeting. So we don't have a situation like we've had in the past where you have to wait for several hours while they file all of the proxies and all of that. So that would be a pretty big change if that happened. The third proposal is to say, so currently the rules of the committee can be amended by a vote of the executive committee, which is all the district leaders, or by a vote of the county committee. What we're concerned about is that the rules are the rules of the county committee, and the executive committee is a standing committee of the county committee. And so the power to change those rules should primarily lie in the larger body of the county committee. So what we're proposing, initially we were thinking to take away the power from the executive committee to amend the rules altogether. But given the feedback that we've gotten, we've changed that to allow the executive committee, that's the district leaders, to change the rules by unanimous vote at a meeting. So given COVID and everything else that's going on, we do want a degree of flexibility to make practical changes to the rules that make sense. So, the hope is that achieves that, but also places some restrictions on fundamentally altering the way the committee works. The next proposal has to do with financial governance and really builds on a resolution that we, IND and NKD and others put forward, feels like years ago, but like a year and a half ago, and requires that there be a budget and that budget be approved by the executive committee, and kind of do a report on how and why spending deviated from that budget and revenues as well. And then the last proposal is actually just to restore the second annual county committee meeting. So prior to January, there were 2 county committee meetings per year. There would be one in January or February having to do with public policy. That got taken away in January. And so this is just reinstating that. We've got some feedback that people don't really like going to county committee meetings in February, so we're actually changing it to March. So the idea is to have a spring meeting, again, saying 2 meetings a year. The executive committee can vote to postpone that meeting, if given how tumultuous everything is, but they'd still be required, or there would still be 2 meetings per year. So those are the proposals, and money. Yes, Joanne. Money is also a concern. But maybe if some of these proposals go through, we'll all feel a lot better about donating to the party. So I don't know if there's time for questions, but I can also, I'll give you my email address and everyone can feel free to email me.
Well, sure, that's great. If you want to give us your email address, maybe in the chat, we can drop it into the comments along with this post, so people can see. And are these? I know that they were being revised recently. Are these available someplace for people to see, or at some point will they become available?
Thank you. Yes, that's a great question. We'll have an online version, still drafting. There's still some conversations we need to have. So everyone who's on the county committee will receive these proposals in the mail prior to the county committee meeting itself. And so you'll have a paper copy that you'll be able to review before the meeting.
Okay, fantastic. And I know part of the reason you guys are making changes is based on feedback from reaching out to so many different club leaders and district leaders. And as you mentioned, myself and some other folks from our club met on Monday to go over it with. So this has been a great collaborative process. So thanks so much for that.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
You know, I'm reminded of years ago now when we got some changes through with Kings County Democratic Committee, where our proposals were things like we should have a website. We should do, you know, we're one of the biggest, not the biggest, but we're one of the biggest Democratic parties in the entire country, and we don't have these basic things. And now our requests are things like have a second meeting. Sometimes it feels like we're inching forward here rather than leaps and bounds, but I guess that's what's available right now, so that's what we're doing. Alyssa, any interesting comments or questions or anything for our remaining folks?
Lincoln says, great presentation, Mariana. Thanks for such thoughtful reform proposals. There's a big thanks to Jessie for her kind words. She's a good student. That's from Joan Millman, by the way. Got a lot of thank yous, so thank you all right back for tuning in and staying with us this whole time. One census plug from Jason Reichel, who says if anyone is interested in phone banking for the census over the next 13 days, please reach out to him. And maybe Jason, if you can drop your email in the comments as well, that would be helpful. And another reminder, my2020census.gov. And I think we got through most of the comments. If anyone has any remaining comments, feel free to drop them in here.
Fantastic. In the meantime, I want to thank Jabari Bridgeport, Brian Kavanaugh, Jesse Pierce, Mariana Alexander, Brian, I sent Brian already. Joanne was here. I want to thank Martin Connor, who came and gave us some information on voting. Anybody I missed? Finally, I want to thank you, Alyssa, for being really helpful in figuring out all of this. We're living in this new world, but you know, we're getting by. So thanks to everybody who tuned in. This will be available as a video. If you joined late, you can catch it from the beginning. I noticed that about it when we did this a couple of months ago. We picked up a lot of views overnight and the next day. This may actually be one of those silver linings that we stick with even after COVID, when we're able to meet in person. I think taping it and making it available for people to watch when they couldn't be there in the moment might be a good idea. So maybe we've learned a little something here. So anyway, thank you guys very much. Good luck to all the parents and teachers and students and to everybody else who's getting by. Take a look at our website and our calendar for upcoming phone banks and for other events. Less than 50 days here, so let's keep the pedal to the floor and get there all together. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Yeah, Jason.